nonprofit groups to help people actually apply for that insurance. It'll show them how they can do it if you're, depending on your income.
Washington Journal airs every morning live at 7 Eastern here on C-SPAN. The House is coming back in now to work on 2 bills related to the health care law, dealing with the employer and individual mandates.
Chaplain Reverend Robert Wagenseal, Calvary Episcopal Church, Indian Rocks Beach, Florida.
God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, thank you for the men and women who have been called to serve your people in this house. As they strive to chart the best possible course for our nation, enable them to remember that we are all in the same boat when it comes to our love of this country and our desire to see the hopes and dreams of our fellow citizens fulfilled. As they seek to walk the road of truth, help them to learn what it means to walk that road together on the common ground of respect and forbearance. Bless their families and make their homes havens of kindness, encouragement, and love. Finally, when they shall have served their final day as members of this House, send them home filled with the true and lasting joy that always comes at last to those who have done their duty and done it well. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
Questions on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The journal stands approved. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pledge of allegiance today will be led by the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Beatty.
Thank you. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Young, is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it is a great honor to introduce to the House our guest chaplain today, Father Bob Wagenseal, the pastor of Calvary Episcopal Church in the beautiful town of Indian Rocks Beach, Florida. Father Bob, as he is affectionately known, is a dear friend and a beloved member of our community. He was ordained in May of 1981, spent most of his 14 years serving churches in Long Island and New York City. By 1993, he was appointed Archdeacon of Queens. To our good fortune in Florida, he was asked to come to Calvary Episcopal in 1995, and it has been a true love affair ever since. In addition to serving the church, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary, Father Bob and his wife Patricia, or PT as she is known, have served our community in many special ways. He serves as chaplain of the Suncoast Fire and Rescue, where he's also a volunteer firefighter. He helped develop a computer learning center at the church, a critical important food pantry, and nearest and dearest to his heart, a community sailing program for the youth of the church and the local community. Father Bob will retire from Calvary on September 15th of this year, after 18 years of service to the church and 34 years to the priesthood. He and PT, who have been married for 35 years, will remain active members of our community and dear friends to the thousands and thousands of people whose lives they have touched, including Congressman Bill Young and his wife Beverly and our 2 sons, Patrick and Billy. Please join me in welcoming Father Bob Wagenseal and PT to the House today. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back.
The chair will entertain 15 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
And revise and extend my remarks.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The case for Obamacare repeal was given a big boost by the administration's decision to delay the controversial employer mandate for another year. This House will vote, we hope this week, to support that much-needed action, as well as postpone the individual mandate for a year. Delaying the burdensome employer mandate will allow companies to continue providing employee health care benefits without reducing work hours. Providing a one-year delay from the individual mandate will relieve American families from thousands of dollars or additional taxes. But postponing the two mandates are only the latest steps to repeal Obamacare. Without complete repeal, Americans will face $1.1 trillion in new taxes, $716 billion in Medicare cuts, and huge health insurance premium increases. Madam Speaker, we must all work together to finish the job by completely repealing Obamacare so that small businesses and individuals will be permanently free from this onerous regulation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and have the right to continue.
The gentlewoman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in honor of Standing Up for Women and celebrating the 100 years anniversary of my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta sorority, a sorority of more than 200,000 black college-educated women founded in 1913, an organization where 22 African-American women were the only women of color to participate in the women's suffrage march. I thank Delta Kappa chapter where I was made and the Columbus and Dayton alumni chapters where I serve for standing on their shoulders and continuing the legacy, because they understand that we must continue to stand up for women in health care, in education, and in the workplace, because when women do better, our children do well. When women do well, our families do well. When women do well, our men do well. And yes, when women do well, America does well. Thank you, women, and thank you, Delta Sigma Theta sorority. And I yield back.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise to ask my colleagues to support H.R. 2667 and H.R. 2668, bills that would delay the employer and individual mandates in Obamacare. These mandates force businesses to provide health coverage to their employees, and as well for individuals to purchase government-dictated health care or pay a penalty. President Obama cited the complexity of the mandate as the reason for his delay. A first grader back home would say, no kidding. Billion-dollar corporations with access to the White House get excused from Obamacare, but the struggling American family gets left out. That's unfair. That's wrong. And more is coming. And that's why I urge my colleagues to support these two bills until we can fully repeal Obamacare and give every American quality health care at a price they can afford with a doctor of their choice. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I recently stood with my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus to call for a national emergency summit on urban violence. And in light of the verdict in Florida, the Trayvon Martin verdict, I wanted to talk about violence that has recently happened in my district and why we need to do something about mental illness. We had an incident where a man killed his pregnant girlfriend, the mother, and her 10-year-old brother, and then went into a neighboring police station and asked for the police to shoot him. We had another incident, a young Somalian boy, only 5 years old. The people that lived in the apartment complex loved to see this little boy ride his bicycle around, and a 13-year-old got into a disagreement with him and beat him in the head until he died, and he left him in a backyard. And then we had another recent drive-by shooting in the district where the assailant said he shot the wrong guy, and the wrong guy was an innocent 12-year-old boy. We need to do something about mental illness and about violence that is gripping this country. It is clear that there are many people who, due to mental illness, do not have the ability to calmly and rationally resolve their differences with others. Instead, they turn to violence. Let's do something about the rising violence in our urban communities. I yield back.
Time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House in 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, the President made inaccurate promises when he shoved a 2,000-page health care takeover bill through both houses of Democrat-controlled Congress. Now he's usurping power again by choosing to relieve employers from the higher taxes and increased government regulations mandated by the Unaffordable Care Act that still requires individuals to suffer. For a president who says he is for fairness, this decision protects big business and targets American families, taking more from their paychecks. House Republicans are acting to protect every American from the unworkable provisions by voting to repeal both the employer and individual mandates. Obamacare is unworkable, unaffordable law that destroys jobs, disrupts the doctor-patient relationship, and promotes uncertainty for future generations. As a proponent of limited government, I fully remain committed to defunding, dismantling, or repealing Obamacare to provide the fairness necessary to allow every American family to make their own health care decisions. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the United States Postal Service continues to try to fix themselves financially with service cuts that will undermine the agency's viability, not strengthen it. I am pleased to be a co-sponsor of my colleague, Congresswoman Rosa DeLaura's legislation to Protect Overnight Delivery Act, to prevent the Postal Service from weakening service standards. Eliminating overnight delivery would threaten hundreds of postal facilities across the nation, including the William Street facility in my Western New York community. Mr. Speaker, while the Postal Service is certainly in need of reform, this is the wrong way to do it. Once again, the Postal Service is making ill-conceived decisions that hurt both workers and consumers. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Alabama seek recognition? The gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to discuss today fairness. Earlier this month, the Obama administration announced it would be delaying the business mandate in the President's health care law. Setting aside a moment the dubious legal authority the executive branch is using to pick and choose which parts of the law will be enforced and which won't, this action represents unfair treatment in the implementation of Obamacare. In delaying the business mandate for a year but not the individual mandate, the President is choosing to protect big business from Obamacare but not hardworking individuals and families. In explaining this delay, White House officials repeatedly said the President was listening to business. Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker, why is the President listening to the American people? Why is he not? Why is big business getting a break while individual Americans get the short end of the stick? Maybe this is what happens when big business has access to the White House and individual Americans can't even take a tour. Today we will take action to protect all Americans by delaying both the employer mandate and the individual mandate. Our work to dismantle Obamacare is part of our ongoing fight to spur economic growth, create jobs, and provide a more secure future for all Americans. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition? The gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to this 38th attempt to repeal the Affordable Health Care Act. Our country needs affordable care. My constituents in Queens and New York need affordable health care. Right now, only 17,000 New Yorkers buy their own health insurance because the insurance premium rates are too high, and 2.6 million New Yorkers do not have health insurance. 13 million people are uninsured nationwide. The most exciting part is that Obamacare is already working. As of this morning, the new approved health care premiums available in New York State health care exchanges for 2014 are on average 50% lower than this year's insurance premiums. That's not even taking into account individuals who can take advantage of other federal subsidies, and that everyone with a health insurance plan will be able to gain access to a basic free preventative health care services. I want to thank New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature also for their leadership on this issue. With all the partisan sniping across the aisle about health care, we cannot lose sight of why our country needs Obamacare. Better access to affordable, preventative health care is essential to reining in health care costs, and more importantly, it's essential for a healthy America. Thank you.
The gentlewoman yields back her time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, the record is clear. Obamacare has been a train wreck since its inception. This latest delay is a testament to the poor planning and widespread mismanagement by President Obama and his administration. President Obama's decision to delay the employer mandate comes after months of promises from the Obama administration claiming that implementation was on schedule and the law was working the way it's supposed to. Every day I hear from constituents who remain strongly opposed to the government takeover of their health care. Delaying the employer mandate for 1 year is a step in the right direction, but individuals need relief also. We must protect all Americans from the unworkable mandates of the President's health care plan by voting to delay both the individual and employer mandates. I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 2668, and I urge its swift adoption. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Colorado yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition? The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to speak about the Community Parks Revitalization Act. This bipartisan legislation will provide matching funds in a new loan program to assist our communities in developing and redeveloping parks and recreation facilities. As a former mayor, I have seen firsthand the value that investing in parks brings to our communities. When we make investments in our parks, it leads to healthy, vibrant neighborhoods where businesses want to invest and families want to live. Our parks and recreation centers are also instrumental in helping to achieve the important national goal of increasing exercise and providing recreation opportunities for our youth and disabled and injured veterans. The Community Parks Revitalization Act has the support of many national organizations, including the National Recreation and Park Association and the American Society of Landscape Architects, and it has strong bipartisan support in the 113th Congress. I encourage my colleagues to join me in strengthening our community parks. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Montana seek recognition? The gentleman from Montana is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, one of the best parts of my job is meeting with Montana students. These young people are the future leaders of our state, and it's exciting to hear about their ideas and aspirations for making their communities and our state a better place to live and to work. As a father of 4, and personally myself a product of Montana's public schools, in fact from kindergarten in Bozeman all the way through college at Montana State University, I know that Montana students have so much potential. We're excited. Our oldest daughter, Annie, will be graduating from Montana State University this fall with a degree in elementary education. That's why it's critical that they have access to quality education and training that prepares them to pursue careers and goals they're passionate about. We must work towards common sense reforms that empower our schools and teachers to innovate and address our students' unique needs. No two students or schools are the same. More local and state input and less federal bureaucracy will help provide our educators with the flexibility they need to help our kids learn. I'm looking forward to our upcoming debate on how we can work to improve our education system, and I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition? Gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, this week over 650,000 civilian employees of the Department of Defense are required to begin taking involuntary furlough days. Over 25,000 of these employees reside in San Diego. This represents about a 20% pay cut for the next 3 months for these public servants. This pay cut is in addition to the fact that federal employees have not received their standard salary adjustment for the past 3 years. These salary cuts have a very damaging effect on the employees and their families. That should be clear to all of us. But they also have disastrous secondary effects. I'm worried particularly about the impact these cuts will have on the recruitment and retention of the civilian workforce. As one of my San Diego constituents in the federal workforce said, furloughs send a very demoralizing and humiliating message to all federal employees, and that suggests that we are not valued and that the work we do is not valued. We must do better. We can start by appointing budget conferees immediately. And I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, the House will vote today to delay the implementation of both the employer and the individual health insurance mandates dictated by Obamacare. The administration announced by way of a blog post that it could not implement the employer mandate by their legal deadline, despite repeated assurances that everything was okay. It is completely unfair for the administration to grant an extension to businesses, but not individual tax-paying Americans. House Republicans are fighting for all Americans. There is still much work to be done. Obamacare continues to be a drag on our economic recovery, leading to fewer choices and more expensive insurance premiums. I urge support of these bills and complete repeal of the President's health care law. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Iowa seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, providing to extend my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise today to highlight the benefits of cancer research and the importance of funding for the National Institutes of Health. In my home state of Iowa alone, 17,480 people will be diagnosed with cancer this year. 6,240 will lose their battle with this disease. Like every state, Iowa receives essential funding from the NIH. NIH funds life-saving medical research that is leading to the development of new and better ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat cancer and other diseases. The research takes place at thousands of universities, hospitals, cancer centers, and laboratories across the country, including the University of Iowa's Holden Comprehensive Cancer Center. In addition to the obvious benefits of combating cancer and so many other diseases, NIH funding supports economic activity and jobs, something we often don't think about. In 2012, NIH funding supported 3,934 jobs in Iowa alone. Funding for cancer research in the NIH, I believe, must be a top priority. I urge Congress to support this life-saving research, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Indiana seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The administration proved what local employers have been telling me for months. Obamacare is bad policy. Even after 3 years of preparation, this law is far from ready for implementation and has proven to be unaffordable. Just today, we learned that we have already paid an additional $1 billion in new taxes just on the medical device tax alone. If there is a delay enacted for businesses, then there needs to be a hardworking Hoosier delay for hardworking taxpayers as well. After all, the American people are the building blocks for our companies. These individuals include parents, young people, single moms, veterans, and seasoned employees. Together, they form our nation's workforce. In our district in northern Indiana, I have heard from schools, restaurants, manufacturers, small business owners who strongly oppose this mandate. At the very least, news of this delay is a relief, but the future is still clouded with uncertainty as long as this law exists. Hoosiers know that a one-year delay of the employer mandate and even the individual mandate is no more than a Band-Aid. Obamacare is a roadblock for American companies. According to small business in the 2nd District, this law is the #1 job killer. That's why I ask for the President to permanently delay the health care law. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, as the House prepares this week to vote for the 38th time to take patient protections away from working families and to undermine the economic security of the middle class, millions of Americans working are struggling to make ends meet due to this Chamber's inaction. It's been months since across-the-board sequester cuts were enacted, devastating so many important federal programs on which Americans rely. And now, as the House leadership refuses to allow votes on alternatives to replace the sequester, 18,132 defense employees are currently being involuntarily furloughed across Pennsylvania, resulting in a $71 million economic loss for my state. In one place alone, 3,528 middle-class Americans are being furloughed at the Tobyhanna Army Depot, a facility that provides essential support for our war fighters. We have to work together to fix this problem, reduce our deficit by growing the economy, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition? Gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Obamacare is not working. The American people know that. Now it seems that President Obama knows that too. The President's unilateral decision to violate the law and delay the employer mandate postpones some of the law's worst damages for businesses. Fundamental fairness dictates that individuals get the same reprieve. Some say delay gives the administration time to get it right. I say no amount of time will fix what's wrong with this job-killing law. Each day this law is delayed gives us more time to seek its total repeal. We must protect as many people as possible from the pain this big government behemoth is inflicting on our nation. And I yield back.
The gentleman from Indiana yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, literacy is the foundation for success in every aspect of our economy and society. Research clearly demonstrates that a literacy-rich environment starting in early childhood is a critical prerequisite for high school graduation, college success, and career readiness. But according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, 2/3 of all 4th and 8th graders do not read at a proficient level. Underachievement in literacy at all educational levels contributes significantly to our nation's high dropout rate, which costs the country hundreds of billions of dollars and squanders the potential and contribution of each student who drops out. That is why today, along with my colleague Mr. Polis, I'm introducing the Literacy Education for All Results for the Nation Act. The LEARN Act provides a strong federal investment for states and localities to develop and implement comprehensive literacy plans for children from birth through 12th grade. Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting the LEARN Act to help ensure today's students are prepared to lead the workforce of the future and keep our nation at the forefront of the global economy. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition? The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, joining me off the House floor today is Jeb Hartman, a dedicated staffer of mine for almost 2 years. Jeb embodies the spirit, work ethic, and patriotism we need from young adults who will one day lead our nation.
He has worked tirelessly, first as an intern, then as a valued member of my communications team, helping to keep my constituents updated on my actions in D.C. and at home. Jeb isn't a future leader. Jeb is a leader today. In just a few weeks, Jeb will leave my office to go to law school. Though he will be missed, I am incredibly proud of him. For Jeb and all the students reaching their own American dream, we must keep the burden of student loan debt from being cost prohibitive. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday in the Senate, we heard some great news. Senators Rand Paul and Ted Cruz joined Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and many others in support of the Military Justice Improvement Act. This is a group of courageous leaders, bipartisan, taking serious action to stop the epidemic of violent sexual assaults amongst our men and women who courageously serve in our military. Recently, the Defense Department reported that 26,000 sexual assaults had occurred in 2012 alone. Contrary to popular belief, this is not just an issue affecting female service members. Over 53% of these assaults, over half of the 26,000, had been male victims. Unfortunately, 87% of these assaults went unreported. This is a matter of basic fairness, transparency, and justice, placing the decision to bring charges against these perpetrators of serious violent crimes into the hands of experienced professional military investigators and prosecutors outside of the chain of command will not erode a commander's ability to lead his or her troops. We must change the status quo. These crimes have been ignored for far too long. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The President announced that his administration plans to ignore Obamacare's employer mandate for 1 year, exempting businesses from its harmful side effects. The White House scrambling is to be expected. Obamacare is a bad law. But it's a bad law the President asked for, and it's a bad law he, as mastermind and chief enforcer, must obey, unless Congress authorizes a change. It's no secret to anyone that House Republicans see Obamacare for the broken law it is. We don't want any American to suffer under its weight. We voted nearly 40 times to delay, dismantle, or repeal the law, and we'll vote again to delay the implementation of Obamacare's onerous employer mandate today. But we aren't stopping there. If businesses are getting a break from the President's law, individual Americans should too. Attempting to justify selective enforcement is beyond rationality. Delaying the individual mandate tax is a matter of basic fairness. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 38 times. How many times will we vote to repeal or take away patient protection from families and to undermine the middle class? It makes no sense. Look at what we know. The United States Supreme Court said the PPACA is constitutional. Millions have already benefited. 100 million cannot have lifetime limits placed upon their health care. By January 2014, 129 million cannot be denied coverage due to a pre-existing condition. By 2020, there will be no donut hole, and already 6.3 million seniors saved $6.1 billion on prescription drugs. Women cannot be discriminated against by 2014. Last year alone, 90% of the best-selling plans still charged women more. And 17 million children are now protected from being denied coverage due to a pre-existing condition. Mr. Speaker, really? 38 times? Why? It makes no common sense. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose, gentleman from Texas seek recognition? Mr. Speaker, I rise, ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman's recognized for 1 minute. Without objection.
All right, Mr. Speaker, here it is, Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, Section 1513, page 159, paragraph D, effective date. This is the section that deals with the so-called employer responsibility, what we call the employer mandate. The effective date, as defined in law. The amendments made by this section shall apply to the months beginning after December 31st, 2013. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to bring the House's attention to a letter that was submitted to Leader Pelosi and Leader Reid by leaders of some of our country's labor unions. Since the this is by from James Hoffa from the Teamsters Union. Since the Affordable Care Act was enacted, we have been bringing our deep concerns to the administration, seeking reasonable regulatory interpretations to the statute that would help prevent the destruction of nonprofit health plans. As you both know firsthand, our persuasive arguments have been disregarded and met with a stone wall by the White House and the pertinent agencies. This is especially stinging because other stakeholders have repeatedly received successful interpretations for their respective grievances. Most disconcerting, of course, is last week's huge accommodation for the employer community, extending the statutorily mandated December 31st, 2013 deadline for the employer mandate and penalties. I yield back the balance of my time.
Time's expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from New Hampshire seek recognition?
Extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently had the pleasure of visiting New Hampshire's Memorial Elementary School in Bedford to congratulate the school community for the recognition as a National Blue Ribbon School. Bedford Memorial Elementary educates children from preschool through the 4th grade, and the school is dedicated to each student's academic, emotional, and physical development. The teachers and staff's attention to every single child and every single detail was obvious from the moment I entered the school. The young students at the school-wide ceremony I attended were some of the best behaved children I have ever seen, and it was clear that the teachers and the administration celebrated children and were dedicated to their wellness and their education. At the ceremony, the school recognized the children, the leaders who had worked out the year to help other students get along. They also sang and they danced a very happy and spirited dance that helped showcase their arts and their holistic approach to education. The ceremony served as a testimony to the tremendous leadership of the principal and the staff and the school board, and most importantly, the parents. The Department of Education's Blue Ribbon School Award is exactly the kind of positive recognition that helps our best available schools and shows others what is possible in every school for every child. Congratulations to them, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the great contributions of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, celebrating its 100th anniversary here in Washington, D.C. this week. Founded in 1913 on the campus of Howard University, Delta Sigma Theta is committed to sisterhood, scholarship, and service. It's the largest African-American women's organization in the country and provides assistance and support to communities throughout the world. Delta has played an important part in civil rights and women's rights, and even in 1913, just after its founding, marched in the Women's Suffrage March. That was his first activity. For a century, Delta members have been at the forefront of politics, medicine, law, the arts, military, and faith. Esteemed members of Delta include civil rights heroine and Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient, the late Dorothy Height, and two of my heroines, Congresspeople Barbara Jordan and Shirley Chisholm. And in the arts, Ruby D. Davis, Cicely Tyson, and Lena Horne. Delta's storied history also includes Memphians of great accomplishment. Mary Church Terrell, Representative Johnny Turner, Speaker Pro Tem Lois DeBerry, the late great civil rights leader Maxine Smith, National Civil Rights Museum Director Beverly Robertson, and Olympic gold medalist Rochelle Stevens. I salute both the Memphis and Shelby County alumni chapters and the thousands of Deltas who are currently in our nation's capital to celebrate their first 100 years. I thank them for their service and wish them many more. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
By the Directions Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 300 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 43, House Resolution 300. Resolved, that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 2668 to delay the application of the individual health insurance mandate. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and on any amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one. 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Ways and Means, and 2, 1 motion to recommit. Section 2. Upon the adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 2667 to delay the application of the employer health insurance mandate and for other purposes. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and on any amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one. 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Ways and Means, and 2, 1 motion to recommit. Section 3, A. In the engrossment of H.R. 2668, the clerk shall, 1, add the text of H.R. 2667 as passed by the House as new matter at the end of H.R. 2668. 2, conform the title of H.R. 2668 to reflect the addition of the text of H.R. 2667 as passed by the House to the engrossment. 3, assign appropriate designations to provisions within the engrossment. And 4, conform cross-references and provisions for short titles within the engrossment. B, upon the addition of the text of H.R. 2667 as passed by the House to the engrossment of H.R. 2668, H.R. 2667 shall be laid on the table.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 hour.
I thank the Speaker. For the purposes of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Slaughter, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, House Resolution 300 provides for consideration of 2 closely related bills, H.R. 2667, the Authority for Mandate Delay, and H.R. 2668, the Fairness for American Families Act. The rule provides for 1 hour of general debate for each bill, controlled by the Committee on Ways and Means. Further, the minority will be offered a motion to recommit on each bill. Because the issues before us in these 2 bills are so closely linked, the rule provides that upon passage, the clerk will merge the text of both bills into a single measure to send to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, we're here today because the President has decided that he alone, without consultation, without advice, consent, or even notice to the United States Congress, has the sole authority to decide which laws he will and which laws he will not enforce. The President has done this with regards to immigration laws. He has done this with regards to duly enacted marriage laws. And now, in an act of true hubris, he has done this with respect to his own signature issue, the President's health care law. July 2nd, 2013, a blog post. A blog post. Not a letter, not a phone call, not a press conference, not even a press release, but a blog post. The President announced 3 significant changes to his health care law that we have been assured over and over is perfect. It's on track. It's on schedule. We will be ready. But this announcement, posted just before the July 4th holiday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on July 2nd, when the administration knew that everyone in the country was preparing to celebrate this country's independence, spending time with their families, everyone's attention was diverted, so they did not notice that 2 major provisions to the President's signature piece of legislation were being postponed. First, the requirement that employers report to the Internal Revenue Service are postponed for a year. Second, the requirement that large employers offer coverage to full-time workers or pay a penalty. Large employers are defined as having 50 or more full-time equivalent workers. Well, that's postponed. And a third, the requirement that coverage offered by large companies be not more than 9.5% of an employee's pay for his or her individual coverage. With the President's supporters chanting, they can't wait. They can't wait any longer for the benefits of the health care law to go into effect, the President has responded and told them, just wait. In showing that House Republicans and the President can in fact come together and agree upon an issue, Mr. Griffin from Arkansas introduced H.R. 2667, the authority for mandate delay, providing the President with the statutory authority that he has already assumed and codifying the President's announcement. Although Republicans have long held that all provisions in the health care bill should be delayed permanently, we can at least come together, we're on the same page as the President, and support his efforts by passing his announcement into law. However, while he's giving a pass to employers, not requiring them to offer health care coverage next year, he gives no such pass to individual citizens. The individual mandate and other elements of the Affordable Care Act remain unchanged. Republicans believe providing relief to businesses while denying that same relief to individuals is inherently unfair. For this reason, Representative Todd Young from Indiana has introduced H.R. 2668, the Fairness for American Families Act. This bill would provide the same relief to individuals and families that the President has provided to business owners. It is the fair thing to do. It is the right thing to do. The President has justified his postponement of the employer mandate by pointing out that the regulations surrounding the mandate are just so very complicated. Businesses will need at least one more year to comply, and quite frankly, his administration will need at least one more year to put the regulations into place. This is the same argument that could be used for the individual mandate. I am highly skeptical, as are many of colleagues, in fact on both sides of the aisle, that this administration will be able to have the exchanges and the insurance programs up and running. Remember, open enrollment starts in just a few weeks, October 1st of this year, a prerequisite for the individual mandate to be able to be implemented. Although officials from the administration repeatedly claim that they are on track to implement this law and to meet the deadlines, the employer mandate postponement shows that the train, in fact, is not coming off the rails. It's already off the rails with regard to implementation. On October 1st, navigating the exchanges will be a nightmare for our constituents, and yet the administration has turned its back on giving them any relief from their law. Even the law's original proponents are beginning to become more vocal about the law's unintended consequences and negative effects on Americans' lives. In a letter sent to Nancy Pelosi and Leader Reid last Friday, 3 major unions wrote, "When you and the President sought our support for the Affordable Care Act, you pledged that if we liked the health plans we have now, we could keep them. Sadly, that promise is under threat right now, unless you," that's Speaker Pelosi and Leader Reid, "unless you and the Obama administration enact an equitable fix, the Affordable Care Act will shatter not only our hard-earned benefits, but destroy the foundation of the 40-hour work week that has been the backbone of the American middle class." After detailing in the letter how Democrats have repeatedly ignored the union's pleas to fix this ill-conceived bill, the letter concludes, "Time is running out. Congress wrote this law. We voted for you, and we have a problem. You need to fix it. The unintended consequences of the Affordable Care Act are severe. Perverse incentives are already creating nightmare scenarios." Mr. Speaker, I hope that the Democrats will join Republicans today and, quite frankly, follow the President's lead and postpone this law. What's good for business should be good for the American people. Republicans have sided with the American people on this issue time and again. The American people do not want this law to be implemented as it's written, and we're here today to see that it is not. I am encouraging my colleagues to vote yes on the rule, yes on the 2 underlying bills. And with that, I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my friend for yielding me the customary 30 minutes and yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, I feel as though I could give the same speech today that I have delivered repeatedly in the Rules Committee and on the House floor for the past 3 years. Despite failing 37 times before, the majority is trying the 38th and 39th time today to repeal, defund, or otherwise undermine the Affordable Health Care Act. However, unlike past votes, today's attempt to undermine the law occurs on the very same day that my home state of New York delivered incredible news to New York families. Today we learned that thanks to the Affordable Care Act, health insurance premiums for many of my fellow New Yorkers will be reduced by 50% or more. In my district alone, 56,330 persons will be eligible to access those savings through New York's new health exchange. Now, New York is just the latest in a growing number of states finding the same thing, including state of Washington, Oregon, California, where the cost of the health care premiums are being reduced because of the Affordable Health Care Act. As the New York Times reported this morning, some individuals in New York, low income, could see their premiums go from $1,000 a month, Mr. Speaker, to as low as $308 a month, and subsidies provided for the lower income persons through the Affordable Care Act will drive those premiums any lower. Believe me when I tell you, New York does not want to be relieved of the burden of the affordable health care. For many of them, it will be the first time in their lives they've actually been able to afford it. This is incredibly good news for millions of people in New York and a realization of the law's promise to provide more affordable health care. Now, among other accomplishments, the Affordable Care Act is increasing competition in New York because 17 insurers have been approved to participate in the individual insurance marketplace. That competition, again, Mr. Speaker, as all of us know, is what helps to bring down the cost, and that is working. And meanwhile, on top of that, as we know, the Care Act requires all insurance companies to spend 80 cents of your premium dollar on your health care, then we know that that will even add to the tumbling costs. And perhaps most importantly, the individual mandate included in the Affordable Health Care Act will soon take effect, driving down costs even more. Given this fact alone, it is the height of irresponsibility and nihilistic obstruction for the majority to attempt to delay its implementation one more time. Delaying the individual mandate would undermine the very foundation of the Affordable Care Act and cause health care premiums to skyrocket. In fact, the Urban Institute has estimated that without the individual mandate, an extra 13.8 million people would go without insurance because of the cost. Now, everyone from doctors to health insurance companies knows this fact, and indeed they are working together in New York to effect this act. And that's why organizations such as the American Academy of Family Physicians, the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association oppose the majority's proposals today. In a letter to Congress, the American Academy of Family Physicians recently wrote that the individual mandate is, quote, the foundation of improving access to care and vital to ensuring everyone has health insurance coverage, end quote. For that reason, the American Academy supports the health coverage requirement and urges that we get on with the program. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is the majority's proposal is nothing more than an attempt to score cheap political points. As has been the case for the last 3 years, the Senate will not take up this bill, and everybody here knows that. And even if they did, by some strange quirk of fate, and pass it, the President would veto it. He said so already. So we're spending another week of legislative business doing meaningless piece of legislation that we know will not go anywhere. When we should be rejoicing, Mr. Speaker, about the things that are coming in from states that have already set up their exchanges, about the money that's being saved, and the many, many more people being insured. I've said many times before, the estimated cost of running the House of Representatives is $24 million a week. Of all people, the members of the majority who claim to care so dearly for stopping wasteful spending should be objecting to a legislative agenda that holds a variation of the same go-nowhere bill for 39 times. Bridges are collapsing. Our economic growth is anemic. Millions of Americans are unemployed. And if the Farm Bill passed here last week were to become law, they would not only be unemployed, they would not be allowed to get food stamps to help them feed their families. Meanwhile, sequestrations, closing Head Start programs, furloughing working moms and dads, and cutting programs that serve vulnerable populations, such as our Indian population living on reservations who are hit extremely hard by sequestration. Yet instead of addressing any of these issues, the majority continues to play this game. Such a self-serving political pursuit is a shameful mark on the history of this chamber and our democracy. Etched above the Speaker's rostrum is a quote from Daniel Webster that speaks to the need to end the political games and to focus on issues that are important to the American people. In part, the words read, quote, "Let us see whether we also in our day and generation may not perform something worthy to be remembered," end quote. In 2010, I was proud to play a central role in the passage of the Affordable Care Act. I faced a lot of vitriol because of it. In the darkest moments, my district office was vandalized and the lives of my grandchildren were threatened. Yet I remained dedicated to passing the law because at the time health care costs were approaching 20% of our nation's GDP, and an unconscionable number of Americans were being denied their basic health care because of the cost or pre-existing conditions. And in 8 states in this United States and the District of Columbia, violence against women, domestic violence, was considered a pre-existing condition. No more. Before voting on the legislation, the Democratic caucus read the bill 3 times, line by line. By the time it was signed into law, it was clear this legislation would deliver on the promise of secure and affordable care for millions who had been denied health care for far too long. Looking back at that moment in time, it is my belief that the law we produce will go down in history, as Webster says, as something worthy to be remembered. Already, thanks to the Affordable Health Care Act, seniors have begun receiving preventive screenings and subsidies to cover the cost of prescription medicines as we close the donut hole. In a few years, the donut hole will be completely closed. In addition, children under the age of 26 are now protected under their parents' insurance coverage while they find their first job and start a life of their own. And finally, as I said prior to the Affordable Care Act, in 8 states, disgracefully, domestic violence was considered a pre-existing condition. Those policies are now outlawed, and soon no health insurance in the country will be allowed to deny an individual coverage because of pre-existing condition, and women will no longer have to pay a higher price for their insurance than men simply because of their gender. All of this incredible progress is because of the Affordable Care Act. So while repealing the mandate may serve the narrow political interests of the majority, it is a dangerous proposition for the health and well-being of American families. Americans deserve a Congress focused on solutions, not a 39th attempt to rehash debates of the past. Mr. Speaker, as we debate yet another go-nowhere attempt to undermine the Affordable Care Act, I urge the majority to read the words above the Speaker's rostrum and put an end to their need and their tired political games. It is past time for us to get to work on meaningful legislation to help the American people. I urge my colleagues to oppose this rule and the underlying legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time. Thank you.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. At this time, I would like to yield 3 minutes to the distinguished chairman of the Committee on Education and Workforce, Mr. Klein from Minnesota.
The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the rule and the underlying legislation. As the attention of the American people turned to celebrating the July 4th holiday, the Obama administration quietly announced through a blog post on the Treasury Department's website it would delay enforcement of a vital part of the President's health care law, the employer mandate. The reason for the delay? According to administration officials, the federal bureaucracy needs more time to get it right. Let's be honest, no amount of time or bureaucratic tinkering will ease the pain Obamacare is inflicting on workplaces across the country. The employer mandate will destroy jobs, whether it's implemented a year from now or 10 years from now. In fact, Mr. Speaker, jobs are already being lost, and employees' work hours are being cut today because of the law. That's the difficult reality facing workers and job creators from my home state of Minnesota and across the country. It's part of the reason we are stuck in a jobs crisis with 12 million Americans searching for full-time work. Even union leaders are beginning to realize how the health care law they supported is hurting workers. And the quote from my colleague, Mr. Burgess, laid that out very clearly. They were promised, as all Americans were promised, if they liked their health care, they could keep it, and they're finding out that's simply not true. The delay of the employer mandate is the latest confirmation of the fatally flawed nature of Obamacare and the need to dismantle it. That is why I support the proposal to delay the employer mandate for 1 year, as well as a bill the House will also consider today to delay enforcement of the individual mandate. In less than a year, individuals who fail to purchase government-approved health insurance will be forced to pay higher taxes. It isn't right, Mr. Speaker, to deny American families the same relief available to American businesses. The American people didn't ask for this government takeover of health care, and they don't want it. Let's give every family and business the reprieve from Obamacare they deserve. I urge my colleagues to support this rule and the underlying legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas
Yield
reserves
back.
the balance of his time. The gentlelady